Welcome back to Living and Investing with me, Jonathan Broekman. Today we explore designing your days for success, building sustainable habits, and unlocking productivity. So my guest today is Louise Janovsky. Welcome.
Thank you.
Please give us an idea of how this happened, how your career unfolded and what you do.
Yeah, I've studied positive psychology and an executive course in coaching, and I've always tried to, as a leader in a business, to be a good coach at the same time. It's quite a good style of leadership with varying success over the years.
We all battle with that.
I'd love to be, as I've grown older, I've got more proficient at a coaching style of leadership. But when you're younger and you're out of your depth, you follow a bit more of an authoritarian style of leadership, and you learn the hard way that that's not always what gets people do what you say, but not with the conviction and the motivation that you want them to. So I really believe in coaching as an avenue, both as a style of leadership in business and helping people to improve their lives. What's amazing about coaching, both in work and in people's personal lives, is it's not about giving someone a plan. People want that. They come to you and say, right, and tell me what to do. But actually each person and each employee is best placed to find their own solutions if they just give themselves the time, if they just sit and think about a problem a little bit, and they know their best solutions. They don't need to be given them by somebody else. And that's a wonderful way to lead employees, by empowering them to come up with their own solutions. And a great way for us all to cover better ground in our own lives is to not be given a solution by someone else, but to take the time to listen to ourselves and to come up with our own solutions. So that's where I am today, just by degrees, learning all the time. And so I spread my time between my promotional gifting business, my writing, my studying, and my coaching.
Louise, for those who may not have read your article on Daily Maverick on perseverance, help us here. What is your roadmap to becoming more empowered for perseverance?
So in that article I used the analogy of getting back onto the wagon, and perseverance is very much about that. It's about making a decision, deciding to follow a goal, and then when the inevitable stumbling block comes along, it's about picking yourself up again and jumping back on the wagon. In that article I used the example of we sit in the dust watching the wagon disappear off into the distance and wait for the next one, but we don't need to. We can run after it and jump back onto it and still arrive on time with it. So perseverance is far more about the daily actions and sticking with the plan. And when the plan doesn't work, it's about reverting to the plan and carrying on.
On that score, how do you distinguish between healthy perseverance and pushing yourself to burnout?
So it's interesting because both involve a decision. Healthy perseverance is deciding to keep at it and to keep covering the ground with the reins firmly in hand. And burnout is pushing and covering the ground, but dropping the reins and getting dragged into a momentum that ends up being damaging. The more controlled, within reason, your actions are, the better you have of fighting the chances of burnout.
Which comes to the next question. How strict should you be on a plan, and how much should you tweak it along the way?
Yes. I think the most important thing is for people to have the plan in the first place. So many of us are trying to achieve goals planless. We know what the dream is, but we haven't designed the plan to get there. If your plan is good, it really is just a case of following it. And it's surprisingly uninteresting to just follow a plan, but it gets you there. And so it's very much about focusing on the steps that you've set up for yourself and following them through.
When I did a motivation course many years ago, the goals poster was the starting point, but the plan was giving effect to achieve the goals poster. Do you still subscribe to that? Goals posters don't seem to be as prevalent or relevant anymore.
I think things start with a goal always. So many of us have the goals and we just don't figure out the way to get there. So you'll hear people say, I've always wanted to write a book, or I've always wanted to study this, or one day I'll be a manager. But if you lay down the stepping stones to get there through setting up a plan, and you don't need someone else to do it for you, you can come up with your own plan. You know the things that you need to do. Then it's a case of just pitching up and putting in the work and following what you've set out for yourself.
In your article, you wrote about having a routine of blocking off time and limiting exposure to your cell phone and emails, and focusing on one job for a longer period.
Yes.
What other tips do you have for changes you can do to be more productive?
So when I think of workplace productivity, I think of words beginning with E. The first is energy. For you to be more productive at work, you need to come in with the right energy to be more productive with anything. And that goes back to all the basics. You need a good night's sleep. You need to have had good nutrition, healthy food. Ideally, you need to have moved, because exercise brings more energy, and not be in a place of anxiety. So the first E is for energy. The second is for ethos, the way that you choose to be at work. The energy that you bring in, and the way that you choose to do your work. So you don't need to be sucked into urgency. You can work methodically, and you can choose the order of things that you work in. Not everything needs to be done all at once. We are very good often at putting together long to-do lists, but spending time adding to them rather than focusing on exactly the endless inbox syndrome, that as fast as you clear it, more will come. So one of the main things with your ethos is being intentional about what you choose to work on in a day. So it can be something as simple as choosing 3 key things that you'd like to get done in a day, and ideally not moving to anything else until you've worked through those 3. And in work, you need to know that there'll be an interruption, there'll be multiple interruptions, and there'll be one of the other E's, an emergency, always an emergency. But that half of what is deemed to be an emergency isn't actually an emergency. It can be put off until later. And so it's sometimes as simple as just sequentially working through the things that you've set up to do. When we were in this office before, we had what we called a pink room. And it was called a pink room because it had a picture of pink handbags on the wall. But we had an open plan office, and an open plan office is a challenge to keep people productive. There's background noise, there's people's cell phones, there's talking. People are very easily distractible, especially if they've got something big and important to do. Then we're all open to all sorts of distractions. But my employees would book the pink room for 2-hour slots, and they'd go in there. They were allowed to take their cell phones, but they had to disable all notifications. And for those 2 hours, they went into that room and did the work that they were employed to do in their interview. And the creativity and the level of the caliber of work that came out of there was always so satisfying for us as a team. And it was a busy room. Girls used to like going in there. And there's something about closing yourself into a room with the door shut and knowing that that's your space to be creative or to get things done. And the same applies in our homes. There are places of relaxation and of sanctuary, but more and more these days, places of work for people. And you can create a space for work in your home or in your business environment that encourages huge productivity. It becomes so that you walk into that room or walk into that space and you feel that you're ready to be creative or productive. So that's important. So there's an ethos in the way that you choose to be at work. And then the other one, which I've linked into a little bit already, is the environment that you create for yourself. If you're in an open plan office, it can be working with earphones so that your employees know that if you've got earphones in, that you're not open for distraction. Or it can be, some companies use a flag system where if the flag is up, don't interrupt me. So there's a lot of different things that you can do for your environment. One of the things I tried over the years as well was from 10 until 12 in the mornings, we switched to classic FM. And that was the sign to everyone in the building that for those 2 hours, there were no interruptions allowed. So the receptionist held everyone's calls, which is hard when you're working with customers because you drop everything for a customer. And for those 2 hours, you weren't allowed to check emails and you focused on getting the big stuff done. And one of the interesting things about starting that was one of the first things that we noticed was people started leaving earlier or on time because they got their big thing done for the day and not let it go on till the afternoon.
It's a good measure of how effective it worked.
Yes. I still hear classic FM these days and think it must click into gear.
Louise, I saw on BBC the other day that school children seeing their parents work from home are beginning to think school is optional. Because my parents aren't going to work, I don't need to go to school. How do you establish that workspace at home that is dedicated to work and separated from personal life?
That's a challenge, but so doable if you get the space right. Trying to work from a dining room table or a kitchen table with everyone all around you ends up being like multitasking, multitasking is essentially doing many things in an average way all at once, as opposed to sequential tasking, which is doing one thing well at a time. So it really is carving out a place and a time for yourself at home. If you know that you are, whilst we all like to be flexible, it's important to not be working into family time and to keeping your hours at good manageable times during the day. So it can be so many ways to create a beautiful space or positive space to work at home, from a quiet room to music in the background to a plant to anything that makes it personal.
You talked about not berating yourself when you fall off the wagon. What are the habits that we can stick to, starting small and growing over time?
So in that article, I talked about 7 different habits, small things that would make a difference over time. So, and the magic word is time. Sticking with something over time means that you trust in time to take care of the compounding behavior. So the first was getting 7 to 8 hours sleep a night. Just 1 month of that. If you do that most nights a week, you're going to feel wonderful. The second was just trying one healthy lunch a day, preparing your lunch and making sure that it's healthy. That compounded over a month helps your nutrition and your energy. The third was move your body in whatever way suits you. If you need to, if it's dancing, or if it's running, or if it's the gym, something that gets you out of breath and gets your heart going. The fourth was less being focused on how much time we're on social media or scrolling, and just taking 15 minutes less of that time and directing those 15 minutes to caring for someone else, a phone call, or there's research about giving to others and how it helps ourselves feel better. The other one was linked back to what we were saying about productivity, is choosing 2 hours every morning, every work morning, to focus on something that moves the needle. So if you do that for the course of a month, by the end of the month you're going to have covered a lot of ground in an important direction. Number 6 was to curate a positive experience for yourself, something different and fun in a week, so that you don't just work on road tasks and let the weeks pass you by. One new experience or an outing could be something interesting that you'd like to watch, or a wonderful phone call with someone that you've missed. And then the last one was, and there's magic in this one, check your emails only 3 times a day. Yeah, schedule a time, make it maybe once in the morning, once at lunchtime, and once at the end of the day, just to clear up. But we deviate to checking our emails during the day as a time filler and as a procrastination tool before we go on to the next thing. And we keep the subject headings in our head, and it distracts us from doing the deep work that helps us cover ground. So there's very rarely any fires that are in there, and nothing terrible happens when you only check 3 times a day. In fact, you get so much more done in the interim.
You talked about the benefits over time, and of course getting started is the most important. Is 30 days enough to put all of those into practice?
30 days is too short if you're going to do anything hugely momentous and difficult. In fact, 7 days is. If you're going to overhaul your diet, overhaul your exercise routine, change your sleep, change the way you work, change the way you tackle social media in drastic directions all at once, it's too hard to sustain. So the best and most manageable change is incremental change. Same as in a business. If as leaders we make a huge decision that turns everything around, it's taxing on people, and it's far more easier to tap into a new direction by degrees than it is to do anything drastic.
Little bite-sized chunks.
Yeah, so 30 days of a healthy lunch, and nights of sleep, 15 minutes less on social media, managed emails, checking one important work task a day. After 30 days, you can't help but have covered ground if you're stuck with it.
I read that the 8-hour workday was as a result of the Industrial Revolution, where we used to work 16 hours and had 8 hours off. And they came up with the idea of 8 hours work, 8 hours play, 8 hours sleep. What do you think of the 8-hour workday and, say, the 5 or 4 workday week?
I think being measured by time at your desk or time spent working is not a fair or fulfilling measurement. I think we should be measured on what we accomplish and the quality of the work that we do. And so the less we focus on clocking in and clocking out, and the more we focus on achieving the goals that we and the company have set for ourselves, the more sustainable and the more satisfying that is.
Getting alignment on your goals and the company's goals, and then allowing the staff to work out how many hours they should devote to achieving the goal. How easily is that translatable and implementable?
So in Andrew Barnes' book, The 4-Day Work Week, he read an article in The Economist where the average amount of time that an employee spends productively working in a day is between 1.5 and 2.5 hours. And by his logic, he thought if I could just add an extra 40 minutes to that time, my employees could work 4 days on and 3 days off and still achieve the same productivity. And he, in his 250-person company, proceeded to roll out a trial. And what made it successful for him was that it wasn't top-down implemented. He said to his staff, it's a gift, the extra day. It's not a 3-day weekend. But if you can come up with the ways to streamline and the ways to productively still achieve what you do in a work week in 4 days instead of 5, then we can give this a proper go. And it worked because he let them drive it and design it rather than him telling them how it should work.
I see Rory Sutherland talks about more people would be allowed to work from home if employers thought that they got the benefit or the same productivity, but that employers see it as that employees are enjoying being at home more than being in the office, and that is their resistance. How do you feel about that?
I think if they enjoy being at home, that's lovely. If they enjoy being at work, that's lovely too. It's almost irrelevant. It comes down to how well they do their work. It comes down to having a really good agreement and understanding between employee and employer on what their role is. And ideally they should be happy whilst they do their work, but it's more about getting the work done beautifully. And the employee is the one who feels the greatest satisfaction there, not just the employer.
Louise, I'm trying a different approach with my staff this year. And rather than measuring output, we're measuring input. So we've defined what the metrics are of what needs to be done and focus on that. The output will follow as a matter of course. What do you think of that approach?
I love that. If people are clear on what's expected of them, then they feel that their service and contribution is valued. And if they're clear and you're clear, watch them perform. Watch them achieve what you've both set out and feel an incredible amount of satisfaction with it from both sides.
It has been way easier to enforce or to monitor, to measure rather than enforce. The enforcement happens on its own.
Yeah. One of the things I noticed when I did my 2 hours of no interruptions from 10 till 12 in the day, classical music playing in the background, everyone choosing the important work task to do. My first biggest lesson was what a problem I was as a manager in terms of an interrupter. As I thought of something that needed to be done, or as I needed something or needed a bit of information, I'd go marching down the passage and into the open plan area, and because I was who I was, everyone would stop what they're doing and listen to me because I'm a leader. And then I'd come back to my desk, and then a few minutes later I'd call someone, and I'd caught myself wanting to interrupt people on multiple occasions. And if you leave people to get on with it and they know they've got that time, they do their work beautifully if they're clear on how to do it.
You've coined the phrase designing your days. What does that mean?
So designing your days is a recognition that you take ownership of your days, that no one else chooses what gets done in them. You design not necessarily what gets done, but how it gets done. So I break design your days down into dream, design, and do. Dream is coming up with the goal in the area of your life that you'd like. Design is how will you get there, and no one knows better than you how to cover that ground. And do is the pitching up and getting it done. So 2 examples would be choosing to eat healthily in a day, curating a healthy lunch meal, or it can be getting something beautiful done in your home, a vase of flowers that you've been meaning to put in the entrance hall or on the kitchen table to lift your own spirits and everybody else's.
Louise, help us understand the time blocking into a flow state. How does that work?
So the first important point is time blocking. There's power in blocking time for yourself. Too many of us don't do it, and we let our days just happen, where we go along with things as they arise. To block an hour or 2 hours of time in a day is to set aside time to do something powerful, and that's the starting point. If you set aside that time, you can decide what you do with it. So if you want to be creative, if you want to get a big work project done, we all know that feeling where time just disappears and you look up and an hour and a half has passed and you're deep into the work of it. So time and flow work beautifully together in that if you block the time in the first place, flow will often follow if you don't allow yourself to be too distracted first.
So it's learning to say no.
Yes, very much so.
Morning versus evening routines, what advice would you offer?
I would offer the advice of pick a routine, establish one. Doesn't matter if it's morning or evening, but a short routine in the morning of intentionality is what sets your day up. It can be made up of exactly what you need, different combinations of exercise, of eating, of maybe just mindfulness and some breathing, whatever it is. It's about being intentional about the start of your day and choosing what you do, and the same at the end of the day as well. If you finish your day well, you're prepped for the next day. And so the important thing is to choose one, experiment with it, and have a go.
So either works. Just stick to it. Thank you, Louise. It was some fantastic insights, and comes back down to application and implementation. Any tips on how to start and how to maintain momentum?
Begin. Get out of your head. Stop thinking about beginning. Begin it.
Just start.
Take the first step. Just begin. Course correct along the way if you need to, but begin.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.